YouTube, what the crap's going on? You've seen a lot of vampires recently. I know, I get it. But watch one more. This one's gonna be interesting. I've showed you a couple of vampire armies. Can vampires take it to the next level? Can they hold their own in tournaments against huge factions like the High Elves? Well, Astrodemos sent me some replays. Let's go check out some tournament gameplay with vampires. Alright, so here we are in the first battle. We're going to take a look at the army here, brought by Astrodemos. He's got a couple of fell bats here. Let me turn on the UI so you can see there's 3 fell bats in total. A Vargulf, 2 Blood Knights, 1 Black Knight with lances and barding. We've got Manfred von Karstein, and then a bunch of skeleton warriors. So the skeleton warriors clearly looking to just kind of be a distractionary, do a little bit of holding, keep the infantry busy for a little while force, and you've got some significant hitting power between the Mortis engine, the 2 Blood Knights, the Vargulfs, and Manfred. That's going to be the power behind this army. You'll also notice that this army is extremely mobile. If we look at the composition, and this is an interesting thing, the vampires, yes, they lack ranged units, and some people think this makes them very weak. I guess in some respects it can, but you got to know how to use the strengths, and I think that that's what we'll see here. We've got a lot of infantry. There's probably, what, 7 of them? But we've got just as many units from the vampires, at least, who are very, very fast. Whereas, let's take a look at the High Elves army here. They've got a front line of White Lions. There's 5 of them. And that should give them some pretty tough infantry versus what the vampires could typically bring. Alariel the Radiant can heal units for a long time. There's a couple of Spearmen. Solid choices. Then you got a Phoenix Guard and this Fireborn Dragon Prince as well. So let's see, can the mobility of the vampires make up for their lack of credible infantry in this fight? Will they be able to strike hard and take out the key elements of the High Elf army? Let's see, this is a match that I've been told by the submitter typically people believe favors the High Elves. Let's hit play and let's watch this unfold. So it looks like we got some bats coming around the flanks to try and keep things distracted. We'll see whether or not he's obviously microing a few things elsewhere. Looks like we've got a huge outflanking force coming from this. We've got bats, Blood Knights, Mortis Engine, Vargulf. So you've got a big hit potentially coming down the left flank of the High Elf army. And you can see the skeletons just coming right up the center. The High Elf player was repositioning, trying to find where he wants to make his stands. Now he's got these the Everqueen's Court Guards, as well as a Phoenix Guard and a Sea Guard back here. So that's his back line. And then these Fireborn Dragon Princes. Very tough cavalry. Anti-large flaming attacks. They're going to get engaged by some Blood Knights here. And they're trying to keep the Court Guard free. And you can see that originally they deployed a ways back. Ooh, look at this slick move. Look how slick that was. Look at the maneuvering there by Astrodemos. Dropping the zombies and then the zigzag pattern gets his Blood Knights right through the main line. That was a beautiful maneuver. And then look, he's going to follow it up with the charge here while the zombies keep him busy. That was a really beautiful maneuver there by Astrodemos. And then here you can see he's trying to do some work on the Dragon Princes. He's going to use Spirit Leech. And I'm assuming it's because the magic cost is lower. It does a little bit of damage. And he's probably just trying to piecemeal away at him rather than do something big like a Fate of Buna. Here comes the Blood Knights. Now, Blood Knights are seen by many people as only kind of an anti-large unit. I feel like that Blood Knights can sometimes be underestimated in their capabilities against infantry because they do have a massive charge bonus. And when they have the Frenzy thing going, it's almost 80. So they can cause tremendous damage to infantry at the same time. So the Star of Avalorn back here being used to keep the Fireborn in the fight. You can see that one Spearman is trying to make its way over as well. So you can see that the vampire player here, Astrodemos, has just used his army to create complete chaos in the lines of the High Elves. And the High Elves infantry is winning the fight, no surprise, against the skeletons, right? But you can see that the goal of the vampire counts here is obviously take the key units off the battlefield. Well, there goes the Fireborn. Yeah, Fireborn. Seems like I always call them something wrong, like the Dragonborn or something. So the Fireborn are gone. The Everqueen's Court Guards are almost gone. And the Lothern Sea Guard got routed. So the vampires initially get in and get the type of engagement they want. Now, Alarielle is nowhere near dead. She has a lot of infantry support alive, including a Phoenix Guard. You can see that Phoenix Guard is taking repeated charges from Blood Knights, and it's taking a toll, as well as the Mortis Engine being engaged nearby. So the Phoenix Guard is taking a little bit of a beating. You can see still out here trying to finish up skeletons. Look how long these skeletons are able to bog down infantry. Ends up being quite effective. The vampires are going to use their healing. They're going to use their Mortis Engine. The Mortis Engine is really good versus infantry blobs, skirmisher blobs if it can get into them. If it gets close, it can terrify units, which again makes it extremely effective, and it's sucking away the life while it does charges with anti-infantry and armor-piercing damage. So again, Mortis Engine, very, very useful unit if you can get into the right situation. Now this is a situation you don't want it to be in, which is getting shot at range by archers. Let's just see how this unfolds. Look at this, repeated charges from the Blood Knights, now becoming very effective anti-infantry killers. So I think, again, people underestimate Blood Knights against infantry. They have a huge charge, and they are very effective on it if they can be used appropriately. The Vargulf at this point, see, he replenishes very quickly, and he can just tank a lot of damage, and he dishes a lot of damage. It's armor-piercing damage, too. So, I mean, it's painful to have a Vargulf after you later in the game because of their healing. It makes them difficult to deal with. They're one of those units that if you don't deal with them quickly, you could end up regretting it over the long run. Look at this. See the surrounding? See how the Mortis Engine rolls in? And then look at the effects on the leadership here. So you took out an entire pocket of High Elves here, and Alarielle is trying to heal all these units, but it's too late. They've routed. Here comes another Star of Avalorn. That'll help a lot in keeping these units in the fight. It'll help a great deal. You can see that the Mortis Engine is starting to mount in terms of damage because of these regrouped archers. This one reroutes. You can see that the vampire's focus is near singular here. Really focusing on these infantry blobs. Bringing in the Blood Knights for a charge while they're engaged with the Mortis Engine. And it's becoming pretty effective here, what they're able to accomplish. A little bit risky to ignore these archers for now, but again, you can tell he's wholly focused right here. And he's very close to getting a rout on all these white lions. Very close. He's going to go ahead and send the Vargulf out here to clean this up because he can see that it's going to end up being a bad deal if he doesn't. Vargulf's very quick moving, pretty good at that kind of thing. His only downside is he doesn't have any armor, and he's a little bit spongy if he ends up under concentrated fire. You got to use the speed to your advantage there. So summoning zombies, this is a way to just add hit points to the fight. You can see that's going to make it difficult for Alarielle to get at the Mortis Engine. She's getting knocked around by cavalry. That actually makes her a lot tougher to deal with, being able to be knocked around like that. That's why some people bring lords on foot, because they don't want it to be really easy for an opponent to put up a huge killing blow. If you have a large unit that can't get staggered, well, it can die really quickly when it gets hit by a lot of heavy damage. And so putting them on foot is one way of trying to avoid that. So although Alarielle gets knocked around, it keeps her alive, and in turn she can try and keep her troops alive. See, there's more regrouping High Elves, but again, you get a Mortis Engine this late into the game, and your leadership is going to tank. You're just not going to be able to handle it. It's going to be too much. Alarielle's now trying to deal with a Vargulf, and this isn't really her department. She's definitely more of a support lord, not meant to be the one in melee carrying the fight. You can see that she is somewhat struggling to do that. Kind of impressive how long it takes the Vargulf to down her because of the way she gets staggered around, but in the meantime, nothing's there to stop the Mortis Engine from just cleaning up all the remaining infantry, and that's exactly what it's going to do. They won't be able to handle the terror. At this point, the Blood Knights are pretty worn down, but I mean, look at the effectiveness here. 132 kills, 2 chevrons. The Lances with Lances and Barding, I think 117 kills. Or no, that's another Blood Knight. Sorry, my bad. Another 117 kills, picked up a chevron. So, impressive performance on the part of the Blood Knights, considering that there was you know, a substantial anti-large unit around in the form of the Phoenix Guard. But I think what you saw here was someone who understands that, yeah, the vampires do have weaknesses because they're slow. They don't have great infantry, right? But I think you see this player take it, Astrodemos here, and he capitalizes on their mobility. I'm going to bring a whole bunch of units that are very mobile. They can get behind your lines. They can cause havoc. I'm going to focus out the key damage-causing units in your army first. And then I'm going to transition into finishing off your main line. So at this point, you could tell at the beginning of the battle, I mean, Astrodemos basically just cedes the mainline fight just by his pick. You know you're not going to win a mainline fight with skeletons. It's not going to happen. So you've already ceded that portion of the fight, and what you're saying is, I am going to win the mobility, and I am going to beat you on the flanks. And as you can see here, ends up working out quite well for him. Let's look at the results of the match. Brachus Rex here put up a dang good fight. And you can see a ton of kills on these lions, and it's not to say that they weren't doing good at what they were doing. They were. But these are skeleton kills, zombie kills. You'll see that not a single one of them picked up a chevron. Were they good at killing enemy infantry? Yes. Was that their purpose? Yes. What's the problem with that? How come this didn't work out? Well, the problem with it is that the key vampire units weren't the infantry. So although the White Lions did extremely good at what they were brought to do, it just wasn't going to work out that way, right? Now, I don't know if this Phoenix Guard actually earned these chevrons in battle. If it did, then that's pretty darn impressive. It did pick up a lot of kills, and it was engaged with some important units there for quite a while, so it's a little bit hard to say on whether it picked up all of those during the battle, but it quite possibly could have. You can see the Everqueen Court Guards and the Lothern Sea Guard, again, struggled because of all the mobility from the vampires. The bats come in and cause the initial confusion, and then you roll in with the Vargulf and all the Blood Knights. Obviously, this Lances and Barding Black Knight got caught up somewhere and wrecked, but the rest of the unit's pretty effective. Manfred on his horse picking up a decent number of kills too, so pretty neat display of seeing the vampires played competitively. Again, as I mentioned in the intro, this is a tournament gameplay. Let's go check out another one that's also quite interesting. So here we are in the second battle. So this is going to be another tournament battle, and Astrodemos here is going to be taking on another tournament opponent. You can see that his base army is similar. He's got a line of skeletons, again, just ceding the infantry fight. They're all spread out across a large area in order to try and occupy the enemy's attention, I'm assuming, across a large area. There's going to be 4 Fellbats, which is a lot. And then we've got some Vargeist, and including the Devils of Schwarzhofen here, which is a pretty crazy cool looking unit here. So we've got the Devils of Schwarzhofen. Here's a Vargulf, and this is going to be Manfred von Karstein. Again, we have Blood Knights on the field, though it looks like we've only got one of them this time. So he's traded some of the Blood Knights up into the air for the Vargulfs. The Vargeist. The Vargeist are going to be like, I'm trying to think how to equate them for you. They're like a lightly armored flying cavalry unit, right? And they deal heavy damage on the charge, but they're extremely squishy in a prolonged melee. So when you bring them down, they have huge weapon strength. They're really good at rear charging infantry, taking out skirmishers, but if you get them in a prolonged melee or get them hit by cavalry, they're going to die. There's the Mortis engine. Now let's check out the High Elf army. And this time, the High Elf does not focus on infantry. He's not concerned about vampire infantry. And that's, in the last video, you could kind of get that same idea from the High Elf player. Hey, I'm not concerned about your infantry. I brought these White Lions. I know I'm going to beat them down. But in this case, the High Elf player's like, I don't care about beating down your infantry. I've brought a ton of missiles. I'm going to shoot up your leadership and your key units. And your infantry's not going to do much to me anyway. I already know that. So that's the kind of the mantra, it seems like, of the... Obviously, I'm trying to get inside someone's head, and I could be wrong, but that's what it looks like to me. So we've got, in total, 3 Sisters of Avalorn. We've got the Court Guard and then 2 normal units. You can see that we've got 2, looks like 5 spear units on the battlefield. And then we've got Teclis rather than the Everqueen. And Teclis would be used, again, as a support unit. He can use Enfeebling Foe. He can use a net to try and pin down key vampire units. So that's going to be your general, why would I pick Teclis in this kind of fight? And you can see that instead of having more spearmen, there's several units of Lothern Sea Guard here, 4 in total. that have been brought to help shore up any infantry issues. So let's watch here. The High Elf player is going to immediately try and gain the high ground. I honestly haven't done any deep studies into how much difference the high ground makes for you in Warhammer 2. Is it real significant? I know in past Total Wars it could be very significant, but I haven't really ever tested that. That might be another a good one for a test video, is we could test a couple of units on flat ground and then do the same test where one of them has an elevation advantage and just kind of see how that works out. Yeah, you're going to see here that both players trying to jockey for position. You can see, though, the Vampire player, Astrodemos here, being very smart about how he's trying to hang back. Look at this Doom Flock out here trying to do some early damage on the Blood Knights. But Teclis actually takes an overcast penalty right there, which kind of sucks for him. But yeah, you can see the Vampire player spreading out, not concentrating all of his forces in order to just be shot up. I mean, if you moved in on this army right here, 7 archers in total, including 3 that have high rate of fire and armor piercing, you would be in trouble really, really quickly. They could kill units extremely fast. The Fireborn here is going to be used to kill units that come after the archers, right? And then the Spearmen are intended to hold back the infantry. Now, obviously, this army is a little bit of a risk. Even though Sea Guard are good against zombies, you have a considerable amount of funds wrapped up in these Sisters of Avalorn. And that is going to be where your main risk in this High Elf army is, and the Vampires have to use their mobility to effectively neutralize the Sisters of Avalorn. If they can do that, they should be able to tank their way through, but remember, they have to do it while also contending with Lothern Sea Guard that are going to be pretty decent in melee against their skeletons, as well as being able to shoot if they're not occupied in melee. And High Elf Spearmen are a tough target for skeletons because they have extremely high defense, especially with martial prowess. So you're going to see it being difficult. You can see the Fireborn here kind of warding off the infantry, keeping it back at a distance. The High Elves want to keep the distance between them and the Vampires so they can exercise their ranged advantage. So you can see they're kind of falling back and making it difficult for the Vampire to surround and engage them. But the Vampire player kind of slowly but surely circling up and getting things in position, being patient with the bats. No one's rushing in too quickly. So even though he has a lot of mobility, he doesn't get into an over rush here. If he's going to be successful, then he's got to make sure that he gets the High Elves exactly in the position that he wants. So that's going to be the key. You can see here that anytime units get close, they come under a withering barrage of arrows. So you can see these skeletons very quickly just getting absolutely tanked. Look at their leadership drops almost entirely off, and then they took massive damage. They're going to end up with about 50% damage to their unit. So lots of challenges that they're going to run into here in terms of trying to take down this army. This army, if it causes the right damage while the Vampires are trying to encircle and engage, then basically it's game over. So that's what the High Elves are trying to accomplish here. Do enough damage before the engagement really begins that the Vampires can't win. The Mortis Engine and the Vargulf are again going to be very key units here. If those units survive into the late game, the High Elves are going to have trouble. Look at the Fireborn here. Yeah, so much for you, skeletons. The skeletons are lucky they were running away from that, and it actually kind of diminished the charge of the Fireborn, or else that would have been a complete KO right there. These skeleton spearmen were not so lucky. They took a pretty hard punch there on that charge. Yeah, you can see that infantry already extremely weakened on this flank by the High Elves. Now, again, these are throwaway units, so it's not going to be a massive victory for the High Elves, but you can see what they're trying to do. I'm going to damage. You won't have enough units left to pull this off. If all you have is big mobility units, then it's a lot harder as the Vampires. You really need your fodder units. If you don't have your fodder units, then all of these units, like the Spearmen, are going to be free to oppose you. Actually, there was 5 Spearmen in total. If I said 4 earlier, I was incorrect. I think I said 5. I can't remember. Yeah, I really like watching these tournament replays. I mean, honestly, I like just playing kind of more casual games personally, but I like watching the tournament replays because I like to see how when people do want to get more competitive, how do they play? And you can see that the High Elf player here is being very patient with the engagement, not allowing the engagement to begin quickly. Again, look what he can do to the infantry. We've already got 3 infantry units that are near destroyed. The Vampires are going to run out of fodder. That's the risk of this, right? See the High Elves they're firing and retreating. They don't want the vampire to get the engagement. And at this point, I think Astrudemos is ready to commit. Feels like he has enough of the High Elf army where he wants it. So he's going to go ahead and commit his bats. So here come the Fell Bats. What are they going to be used for? Well, they've got to tie down some of the archers. Not necessarily just to keep them from firing, though that is one purpose. But the other purpose is to hold the elf army in place so that he can actually engage them. The elf army can't just turn around and leave their archers to be killed. He's going to have to engage and save his archers here. So you can see he's going to bring in the Fireborn, be ready for protection. The High Elf player, being very smart here, sees the Mortis engine, going to focus on the Mortis engine. This gives the extremely slow vampires a chance to try and engage. Earlier you saw the elves taking advantage of the fact that the vampires were so slow. And then over here, there's going to be an engagement. The Vargulf, Manfred, summon zombies being used here very nicely to just, again, throw hit points. But the High Elf player not falling for the Vargulf getting behind his lines. He gets the Fireborn over here because he sees it. The Vargulf would die very quickly to Fireborn. Watch this beautiful bait and switch here by the Vargulf. Gonna get the Fireborn into some Blood Knights. Still a fight the Fireborn can handle, and they're gonna actually get hit with the regrowth, which is gonna make them particularly tough. But now the Vargulf can come back and support the Blood Knights. But again, look at all the infantry and other units nearby. The Vargeist come in, and they're able to start trying to hit the archers. If they do kind of good charges down onto the Sea Guard and other units, you can see the damage, how quickly they cause that damage. So they can be used like that to cycle down on units that don't have high armor, and they will do a very quick knockout blow. Just look at that. But, as you can see, they're also squishy. They're under fire still. Again, Spirit Leech and other stuff being used here. The Fireborn are going to be a very tough nut to crack. You can see the Skeletons already doing their job, which is just hold, keep some of these units busy. And at this point, the High Elves are struggling to keep their archers free and firing so they can cause the damage they need to. Again, look at these Vargeist. One of them gets caught by a net. The other one actually makes it down into the Sisters of Avalorn. Again, when those nets come in, you can see why it's going to be a problem. The High Elves are able to continue to fire, and it makes it harder for the vampires to pin down all their units. So this is a tough fight. It's a very tough fight right now for the vampires, and the vampires lost a lot of their fodder early on in the battle, and there's still a considerable number of very healthy High Elf units here, and there's a lot of archers. But the archers are kind of slowly being dealt with. Look at the Everqueen's Court Guard over here, bogged down with some Blood Knights. The Blood Knights have a chevron. I don't remember if it was on them to begin with, but they only have 33 kills. That would have been from fighting the Fireborn, actually, now that I remember. Yeah, let's fight over here. Got Teclis bogged down. There's some Sisters of Avalorn. Sisters of Avalorn will do pretty decent in melee against these vampire infantry, but is that really where you want them, right? No, it's not, ideally. Especially if they still have ammunition left. The Vargulf is going to keep attacking regrouped archers. You can see here he's going to get put onto these Sisters of Avalorn because they're the bigger threat with their damage. The Vargeist are taking a lot of damage, but they've also caused quite a lot of damage. You can see here that they're focused on those Everqueen's Court Guard, trying to take down the key units. Deal the most damage that you can. The Mortis engine, because of all the different mobile units tying down archers, the Mortis engine doesn't become the sole focus of the High Elves, and because it doesn't, it's able to do this kind of thing. When that thing gets into infantry, you're in trouble. So you can see here that they're losing hit points relatively quick, and the Mortis engine is going to start doing what it does best. We're doing what it does the worst to you, I guess is what I should say. It's the worst thing. You don't want to see that thing in the late game. Vargulf finds some more Sisters of Avalorn, and then you can see these Vargeist cycling another charge into the Everqueen's Court Guard and dishing out some big damage. But there's more Sisters and more Lothern Sea Guard that are regrouping, and the vampires starting to run pretty short in some areas on their fodder units, right? The fodder units are critical, but you can see that the High Elves in this fight, it's not good. They had all that ammunition they hadn't spent, and they started taking a lot of damage. Not being able to spend that ammunition means that they didn't get a chance to cause the damage that they need to here. And again, Sea Guard, Sisters of Avalorn, they can hold their own decently in a fight against the vampire infantry, but if it's not the infantry that they really have to be worried about. It's all these mobility units. the Vargeist all over you, a Vargulf up in your face, a Mortis engine slamming around in between units, and it causes terror. It can cause easy routes. You can see at this point the High Elf player kind of getting split up and torn apart. Manfred's over here. He's going to start disrupting the Everqueen's court guard. Nice zombie summon here to try and keep this other Sister of Avalorn out, because the Mortis engine was actually very close to dying here. It got attacked by Teclis, and it's getting hit by a lot of archer fire. So this was almost a knockout, and it would have been an important one, because that Mortis engine's doing a lot of damage to the High Elves. It's doing a lot of damage. And every time it gets in here, you know, it's just taking more hit points. It's potentially causing terror. It is definitely getting down on its last legs, but the vampires swing the battle in their favor. So there's a couple of interesting replays. High Elves typically thought to have an advantage over the vampires, and that may be true. May be true in some respects. But, I mean, the vampires certainly have advantages over the High Elves, and that advantage is mobility. They have an extreme mobility advantage over the High Elves. The High Elves have some good units. They're just expensive. And if they spend all their money on those mobility units, I don't think it's going to match up well against what the vampires throw at them. And very interesting use here with Manfred. He was on a horse the whole time. He wasn't flying. He wasn't on a dragon. He's on the ground, but he's still being very effective. This makes him cheaper, which means that more money can be poured into the mobility of this army. Look at this, 5 flying units. That's going to make archery, you know, work an absolute nightmare. And you might think, well, what if the High Elf player just forgoes all of the archery stuff and just goes for like an infantry and cavalry build? They could try it, but again, if they can't get to the Mortis engine and it survives to the late game, even though you could easily win the infantry fight, if this thing survives to the late game, if the Vargulf survives to the late game, your infantry's not going to survive. They'll just slowly get picked apart. So I don't know, that's my thought. So interesting plays here by Astrodemos. Thank you so much for submitting it. I really enjoyed seeing kind of the tournament aspect to some of this gameplay. And good game to Jaime Lannister too. That was a tough army. I definitely would have fallen apart to this army with the vampires. I don't see myself being able to have the skill to beat or the skill to outpick an army like this from Jaime. So it was a good army. It was a good army, and you can see the kind of challenge that it put up against that vampire, and you can see how if someone didn't pick well with the vampires, how you could pretty quickly get torn apart by that High Elf army. So it's an interesting pick, interesting play, well done by both players. So thank you very much for bringing that in. I do hope you all enjoyed this. I hope it taught you something, right? Hope it kind of taught you. Obviously, there's a lot of skill involved here. You see Astrodemos and his opponents were skilled. All of that comes with time, right? They've spent a lot of time in the game. They've spent a lot of time learning and testing. They've also learned good ways to control their units, how to focus their attention, like that little zombie juke with the Blood Knights in the first battle. That was impeccable. That was nice. That's the kind of stuff that as you spend some time practicing and you get good, you do that. And it's tough. When someone is really good at controlling their units, it is tough to outplay that. And so that's obviously one skill that these players pick up. That's something that's not my strength, right? The only way that I do decently in this game out in quick battle is just probably because of my knowledge in it. I'm not perfect at it, but like I know enough how to pick somewhat decent armies, and I end up doing fairly well compared to like the whole, right? But when I get myself into a battle against folks like this that just have that skill with the clicking, and combine that with their knowledge of the armies, which is greater than mine typically, and that experience, then that's why games can get very tough for me, and that's fun, right? I like playing those games from time to time. It's a challenge. So that's where I would encourage you all to get out into multiplayer. Yeah, quick battle's not a tournament. It's a little different than playing in a tournament. That's fine. It's good practice. Go out, challenge yourself, see what you can do. Try to outthink. Try and do something different with your armies, like you saw the vampires here. Sure, their infantry's not great, so forget the infantry and go down a whole different track there, which is what you saw happen. Now, I know I've had a lot of vampire-heavy videos recently, but this is really just, it was probably because I had the vampire-themed video that Astrodemos sent this in, and I wanted to show it as a good follow-up. A few days ago, some of you may have been thinking vampires are so weak, I'm not even going to mess with them in multiplayer. And now I showed you an army. You saw another army from WoWask, and then you saw this army from Aster Demos, 2 versions of it, and you saw it being used in an extremely competitive environment. So does that challenge your notions of where the different factions rank in terms of how good they are? Again, think about it. Interesting to think on. Anyway, HeirofCarthage signing out for now. I do hope y'all enjoyed this one. If you did like it, if you're not a big, huge High Elf fan that got mad by seeing the High Elves get beaten, go hit that like button. Helps me out a lot, helps other people find the videos. If you want to see more, subscribe and push the stupid bell so that you can get notified when the new videos come up. You can be the first one to come in and see it, and there will be more videos. I do hope you all enjoyed it. HeirofCarthage signing out for now.